In this video, we're going to take you through a corral trapping effort which took place in a pecan orchard within the Post Oak Savanna ecoregion of Texas during the month of June. Ample rainfall during the preceding months resulted in an abundance of food resources throughout the landscape. As a result, wild pigs in the area did not have to travel far to obtain reliable food resources. In order for us to locate the ideal trap site, it was important to detect their active travel routes which connected bedding and feeding areas. Our scouting efforts determined that a sounder was bedding down in the wooded area, and the pigs were using a nearby creek as a travel corridor to access available forage within the orchard. An active creek crossing was identified by the presence of disturbed soil and an abundance of wild pig tracks. The area just above this active crossing was selected as our trap site. In addition to the occurrence of ample wild pig sign, some important features of our trap site were its location upwind of the pig's daytime bedding area and the presence of natural vegetation within the trap to break up its outline. Overhead canopy also provided the additional benefit of shade throughout the trap enclosure. Prior to constructing the trap, we pre-baited the site with shelled corn for a period of 4 days and monitored the pig's response with game cameras. Since the location was upwind of the pig's bedding area, the natural air currents carried the scent of the bait towards the pigs. Once our game camera images indicated that the pigs were consistently visiting the site, we made the decision to move forward with constructing the trap. This pre-baiting process allowed us to evaluate the sounder's size and match the corral trap size accordingly. We documented a total of 11 wild pigs and decided to construct our corral trap using 5 16-foot long utility panels with 4-inch by 4-inch mesh throughout, which would prevent juveniles from escaping through the paneling. T-posts were installed every 4 feet around the trap and were wired from the outside at 5 points ranging from the top to the bottom of the fence panel. The trap gate was placed directly alongside the active wild pig trail and was wired open to prevent the gate from closing while the pigs were being conditioned to entering the trap enclosure. Game cameras were installed strategically to monitor both the trap entrance and the tripwire areas. Once the trap was fully constructed, shelled corn was placed both outside and within the trap to allow the pigs to feed their way into the trap. We placed the feeder with a digital timer to provide a reliable source of bait and programmed the feeder to go off each night at 9 p.m. Corn sacks were installed around the bottom of the feeder to direct any dispensed corn directly below the feeder. The selection of an appropriate manual trigger for any corral trapping effort is highly important. Multiple manual triggers are available that range from least selective to most selective. A traditional tripwire or trough trigger can be considered least selective since it can be easily triggered by juveniles. Rooter sticks and bucket triggers are less likely to be set off by juveniles, and therefore they can be considered more selective. Tire triggers are even less likely to be set off by juveniles due to their size and weight, and are considered the most selective compared to other manual triggers. The selectivity of a manual trigger becomes more important when a sounder contains both adults and juveniles. Adults are often the last to enter the trap, even when they've been conditioned to a trap site, and thus a trigger which can only be activated by adults should be selected. A tire trigger is a good choice. In this trapping effort, a traditional tripwire was selected due to the consistency of the sounder's arrival into the trap and the uniformity of their age class. A false tripwire was installed towards the front of the trap in order to make the pigs contend with it prior to accessing the bait. The presence of this false tripwire, coupled with the trap gate tied open, allowed the pigs to become conditioned to interacting with the tripwire while forming no negative association between the two. Due to the remote location of the trap site and additional responsibilities elsewhere, the trap site was not revisited for 8 days. The extended absence allowed for reduced site disturbance and minimized human scent within and around the trap location. Upon returning to the trap site on day 9, our game camera footage indicated that the sounder of 11 pigs routinely entered the trap between 9 and 10 p.m. each night to feed. Since the entire sounder comfortably entered the trap on a predictable schedule, the decision was made to set the trap to catch. A new tripwire was installed and connected to a stick which held the trap gates open. The feeder was programmed to feed an additional amount of corn, and the area behind the tripwire was hand-baited. That night, the feeder went off just as scheduled at 9 p.m. Our game camera footage indicated that the pigs did not show up to the trap site as usual. An intense thunderstorm had moved through earlier in the day, which resulted in elevated water levels within the creek. The above normal water levels may have discouraged the pigs from crossing that night to access the trap site. The next night, the feeder went off on schedule, and the sounder arrived to feed at 9:35 p.m. Most of the sounder went directly into the trap to eat under the feeder, but several members initially remained outside to feed. By 9:46 p.m., the remaining members of the sounder had entered the trap enclosure to feed. Within the next minute, the trap was triggered and the sounder showed minimal response, quickly returning to feeding on the corn. Capturing 100% of the sounder is an ideal result in any corral trapping effort. While manually triggered trap gates are less selective than remotely triggered trap gates, they can still be successful in capturing an entire sounder. While trapping can be an effective tool, a best management practice for wild pigs often includes a combined approach, including aerial gunning, strategic shooting, snaring, and the use of trained dogs. For more information on wild pigs, you can visit our website, feralhogs.tamu.edu.